Okay, hi everyone. My name's Luke Hennerley, and this is my first ever sort of remote live streamed talk. So hopefully it goes okay. The guys asked me if I would be interested in doing one, and I thought this would be a pretty cool topic to cover, especially as maybe some people haven't worked on a project of this length, and also remotely as we are. So yeah, just briefly I'll do a bit of an introduction. So as you can see at the bottom, I'm very passionate about helping tech communities and getting people into tech. So I work for a company called SideTrade. So SideTrade a European company, and we have offices in Paris and Birmingham in terms of R&D. So we are quite accustomed to having to work remotely with one another. I'm based in the Birmingham office here in the UK. I started as a software apprentice on one of the first Microsoft pilot schemes in the UK, age 16. So I'm now 25. So I've now been working for around 9 to 10 years in the industry. And I've also recently, around 2 years ago, I launched a software bootcamp in the UK called SideTrade Code Academy. So this surrounds just getting people into employment. It's a completely free bootcamp. And I did my first tech talk 2 weeks ago, just before everything sort of got locked down. So this is my second. So the first one went really well, and hopefully I can deliver some similar content here, and it's really useful to everybody on these subjects. So in terms of what we'll cover, so I guess I'm trying to cover quite a lot of different things in this. Number one, sort of introduction to the Kanban concept. So probably quite a lot of people will already know this who are sort of watching the stream. But I think it's important for those who don't know this and want to have a methodology and some tooling whereby they can manage their project. Effectively planning your 3-week software project. So if you're working on something for 3 weeks, you need to effectively plan it, obviously. Keeping track, that's one of the most difficult things, keeping track of your progress with one another, what each other are working on. You don't want somebody go and work on one section of the screen and all of a sudden you're about to do a pull request and it's like, oh, I did that too. So that's another element. And then I've also got a team in the hackathon. We're working on a project, so I thought it would be pretty important to show what we're doing and how we've started to manage our process, and we'll go into a bit more technical detail there too around sort of continuous integration, continuous deployment, and sort of how we're operating on that. Kanban's been around for a while. For those who don't know, it originated from Toyota, for sort of lean engineering. So normally what will happen is you'll have like a collection of lists. So you can just have something really simple to do in progress and done. From here we can do something, we have some cards which are just some little chunks of functionality, and we can just start to populate the list of what we want to do to achieve our project. So we have a card here, for example, create some basic landing page, and you can start to populate your list quite easily. And then it's very simple, everything moves sort of left to right. So you'll assign, somebody will go pick up this card. So the situation I just spoke about around somebody working on something in it not being clear, you can look at a Kanban board and see, somebody's already doing the landing page, so I'm not going to go and do that. And it just progresses left to right. So it's pretty simple. You take your card out of one column and to another. So it's a really interesting concept. It's been around for a while. It's easy to manage your team. So, and also obviously if you're on different time zones, which quite a lot of people will be, somebody can go and look at a board and see exactly where the progress is of something just by looking at the board. So it's pretty cool. In terms of tooling, you can use Trello. It's a free tool. So you can go and create a list very similar to this, and you can go and start creating your features of what you want to do within your team and progressing them separately. So I recommend if you don't know about Kanban or Trello, you try and orientate your team to do this. It's really useful. So yeah, in terms of effective planning, so like you obviously need to get some cards. You need to populate your Trello Kanban board. In order to do this, you need to plan effectively. This is one of my key mantras when I sort of talk to my team in Birmingham, is don't touch the keyboard straight away. It's really tempting to go and do this. I think obviously normal hackathons, from where I've not usually attended one, but from what I hear, they're pretty intensive. You go straight away. You've got 2 days. You have to do this. 3 weeks is a little bit different. If you're trying to do like sort of a project over a 3-week period, so a longer period, the first thing I recommend to do is try not to touch the keyboard straight away. Orientation is absolutely massive, so it's really important that you establish what you're aiming for. So try and get some high level spec, try and get those into cards, so you can see what it is you're going to be working on for 3 weeks. Who's going to work on which card first, so try and assign all of this out. It makes it this is a really important step. So you can look at people's skill sets, where they want to work as well. Obviously, we're all trying to learn stuff here, and try and estimate sort of when you're going to try and finish the card. So, like if you're doing a 3-week project and you have a card that seems quite chunky, it may be worth trying to break that down even further into smaller cards. If somebody says, "Oh, I think I can do the landing page example in 2 days," then that's great. You sort of know when to expect it. But these are really important if you're working remotely, trying to orientate your team. So trying to get that orientation stuff is really important. Effectively planning continues. So establishing the what. So on the previous slide, we sort of talked about make sure you orientate yourselves first, understand each other and what you're trying to do. This is around sort of establishing the what. So a brief explanation to problem you're trying to solve, why it's needed. So if you're trying to solve a problem, it's really important you try and write it down in words, not just try and explain it. So get it into a sort of collaborative Google Doc, or something like this. Try and understand who your users are going to be, your stakeholders. This is another important step because each user will have a different entry point. If you try and understand your users and how they will interact with your tool, then it will change your requirements and you'll start to come up with different problems and different elements, and you'll go a different way. And then try and come up with sort of a rough workflow for each sort of stakeholder or user. So when a user logs in of this type, what are they going to do? I'll reference this again in sort of our project and how we're trying to do this and solve this. But this is a really important step. Trying to establish the what before you actually start programming. Otherwise, what may happen is you will end up in sort of getting midway through and you're like, oh, we spent a week on this and now we've got this problem and we don't know how to solve it. And you could have solved that just by spending a little bit of time doing like a collaborative doc. So in terms of tracking progress, there's a ceremony in sort of agile methodology. Again, some people may already have heard of this or know of this, but try and do sort of a daily. If you find dailies too much, even sort of bi-daily, every other day, stand up. But obviously, mostly we'll probably all be sitting down remotely. So it's pretty key to try and do this. So usually a stand up will look like this. Sort of what I did yesterday or prior to the last update that I gave, what I'm planning to do today, and what is currently blocking me. So if you started to work on a Node project and you're trying to do an npm install and it's not working or something like this, that would be blocking you. So it's important that you raise this. This is the forum to raise this. If you did try and go for the Kanban option, try and use your Kanban board to talk around this and like say, oh, this is currently in progress and I said I'd finish it today, but it slowed down a little bit. I'm going to try and do it tomorrow, and try and look at where the blockers are or and all of this sort of stuff. If you start to see too many cars in one sort of lane, then you know that there's sort of a pitfall there, and you need to try and solve that. Yeah, you can try and orientate this as a team call if you feel comfortable. Obviously, with working remotely, it's nice to have this sort of social interaction of voice, but obviously, as we're all just meeting each other in our teams, some people won't be comfortable with this. So you can just sort of do it as a message. So try and do an update as a message whenever you decide you want to do a stand-up. But yeah, these are really effective meetings. They're very common for those who haven't worked in the industry. And again, it may be sort of trying to explain stuff that people already know. But I think it's important for those who don't. Communication's king. So making sure you're constantly talking to each other, even if it's not anything to do with the subject you're working on, to keep that sort of team buzz going. 3 weeks may not seem like a long time, but it can be. So you need to try and keep your team sort of interested in what you're doing. Don't be afraid to say you're blocked. So like everyone's sort of willing to help each other. It's not a bad thing to say that you're stuck on something. Everybody, it's the nature of sort of software development and software developers in general, that people are always willing to help. So you shouldn't be afraid to tell your team, even if you've never met them, that you're blocked. Try and keep the group chats active, and also make sure your board and your lists within the board make sense to your team. So you can customize your board to do whatever your team want. So I've got a couple of examples of this. So we only had sort of to do, in progress, and done, but you can consider other lists such as in pull request, etc. So if within your team you want to have a pull request column, so you know that this feature is in pull request, then that would be great. But try and establish this together so everybody knows what your process is within your own team. Again, it comes back to the fact that you should be able to go to your Kanban board and see exactly what you're working on, where your team is, and sort of what the next stage of what you're working on is. So what I'll do is I'll take sort of everything that I've just explained and I'll explain what my team's doing currently. So we're using Azure DevOps for our code organization, releases, and it keeps our infrastructure in one place. The good thing with Azure is when you sign up, you get £150 free credit in Azure, so it's pretty good for this sort of time frame. And obviously, it's very well supported in the industry. So another key thing is documentation when you're working remotely. So you can Google pretty much anything, and Stack Overflow will be your friend. You can find stuff whenever you want in any time zone. And then we've created our own sort of Slack channel or Slack team for our centralized team communication. But the nice thing is we've integrated Azure DevOps within Slack. So there's a new concept of chat ops, which we're leveraging within what we're doing. So we're working on a project called Hamper Connect within the hackathon, which has got a React front end, Node, Express backend talking to a Postgres database. What we did is we used some starter packs. So we used SideTrade have delivered an open source React starter pack, which you can see on SideTrade Labs. You can feel free to fork this. It has nearly everything you need to just start programming on a React framework. And I also I created an Express REST API starter pack, which is on my personal GitHub. This covers database migrations, routing. I didn't include authentication in here on this implementation because some people want to use different authentication providers. But for our project, we use something like Auth0. What I wanted to quickly do is just explain everything that I just did, but apply it in terms of how we're doing our hackathon. So I created a collaborative Google Doc, which explains sort of everybody who's coming onto the team what we're doing, so like the project purpose. So the main thing is around sort of at the moment, especially I guess it's probably worldwide, but in the UK, we're asking sort of OAPs and people most at risk to sort of lock down, and it's very difficult for them to go get their essentials, and they don't have any tooling. So again, looking at the user profile, so I'll take my nan as an example. She just has a mobile. She's no way to connect to the outside world through social media platforms. So she doesn't have an internet connection, all of this type of stuff. So COVID Hampers is a peer-to-peer platform to connect people into the local area and request essential products that they need over the coming weeks in self-quarantine measures. So I did a brief bit about how it works, so anybody who comes and joined our team could see how this would work, and we can ask questions and change all of this. So we had a brief explanation of how it works. So we go for a family and friends approach to join the group, a group, and they can register some people who are in self-isolation. If they have a mobile number, we can send an SMS to this person to acknowledge that they're in the service, and we try to keep it a little bit personable, so that if somebody collects a hamper to be delivered to a person, they'll get a SMS to say your hamper's been collected and it will be delivered in X amount of minutes. So this is a real rough and ready start, but it's a good way for everybody to sort of understand what we're doing. Another concept is MVP, so try and establish your minimum viable product. So this is what our sort of MVP started to look like. So we needed to be able to log in. We want to be able to see a list of people who are within my group, invite people, assign yourself to collect a hamper to be delivered to a person, ability to see group members, ability to join. So you can see some sort of minimum viable products in the areas here. And then what we'll do is, if we manage to achieve this minimum sort of viable product within the 3 weeks, or even a shorter time period, then we'll look at the next iteration and build out from there. The next bit, so we put our team on here, so the people from the Discord, their time zones, their location, their roles, and their availability, which obviously anybody can come here in the team and we can see this. And then if I just quickly jump back, so what I did is I created sort of a workflow to explain how our team will operate sort of remotely. So we fill the backlog with some requirements, where each developer can go and create and choose a task then to go and achieve some of these requirements, create a pull request, create a branch and a pull request. And then once they're happy, it will run a pipeline, which will build an artifact that goes up to a Docker registry in Azure. And we've set up Azure so that the front, the React front end and the Express backend will automatically deploy and continuously deploy these Docker images that get pushed. So again, we have some guidelines for how we want our team to work within the Google Docs. So it's a really easy place, central place. If anybody gets confused or somebody's offline in a time zone, you can go on and you can see this pretty quickly, and we've got all the implementation notes there. So I'll do a little bit of a show and tell of how far we've got in the first couple of days. So we're not using Trello, but Trello is a really great tool if you want something pretty basic for your squad or your team. So we've got our boards here, and we can see who's working on what at any given time. So you can see we started to do, we've got some base repositories, get it deployed into production into Azure. So that's one task, one set of stuff that's already been completed. We had some tasks that we're going to do. And yeah, this is sort of a really good example of a board. We have only 4 columns. We have to do, doing pull requests and done. Anybody can go in and create a task who's in the team, and then they can assign it to themselves and complete the work. The nice thing is, as I said, you've got all your infrastructure in one place. It's pretty easy to set up, and you get the £150 credit. So I don't think you'll ever exceed that for a project that you're working on. So we have our API and our sort of front end in here. And what will happen is the pipelines will run every time we do a push into master. So we can see we can see we have two sets of pipelines. We have the API and the front. For those who've used something like GitLab, you get to use YAML implementation, so we'll just check in the YAML. It's pretty simple what we're doing right now. You can extend this as much as you want, but this is pretty much all we need. So we'll just install node, npm install and build. Then we'll just copy the files out to an artifact. So we'll take the build output and our Docker file. We include the package JSON here so that we can run the database migrations, so we can upgrade the database whenever we do a release. But ultimately, what this means is that whenever one of these pipelines run, we get an artifact out, and it's really effective. Then once we're happy, what we can do, you can see my teammate Kieran's created some releases here. We'll have some artifacts that get published by each pipeline, and then we'll deploy the web API and deploy the front out. And these are pretty simple. What we can do is, if I just look at the tasks, all it does is it will use my container registry up in Azure, build a Docker file and publish that out. And that's literally all it needs to do, because Azure is quite powerful. So our Docker file looks something like this, pretty simple. And then up in Azure, we set up a Azure app service, connect to the registry, choose our image, and then we set this continuous deployment to on. And what this will do is anytime that a Docker image is pushed up to the registry, it will automatically deploy. So this is how our team is sort of deploying and working together remotely. We can see, again, just to go back, we can see exactly what everyone's working on. And whenever somebody merges into master and we do a pull request and we want to do a release, we can do that pretty easily. Another nice thing that we've done is that we've integrated within Slack. So I said we have our own Slack channel, so you can see sort of the type of stuff we're talking about here, just general chat. But we also have a channel associated to DevOps. So if somebody completes a task or we get some new work, we can see that, and it's really transparent and really clear and easy to see. But yeah, I think that just to sort of wrap up, that's a whistle-stop tour of everything that we're doing right now. So on a Hamper Connect, these are really cool libraries that should be able to help if you haven't already started. But the key points, I guess, is organisation and orientation. So try and use some form of tooling to get that between your group. Kanban is probably my recommendation, and creating a Trello board if you haven't already. And then sort of one of these working docs can be really useful. So trying to let your team know and establish this together, what you're working on and how you intend to work, the time zones, and your availability, because that's pretty important. And then this sort of MVP, trying to establish what your MVP is, because with it being 3 weeks, as I say, it may seem like a long time, but we will have, as developers are very ambitious, so what can happen is you can set huge ambitions, and then you get to the end of the 3 weeks and you may not have achieved what you want. So try and get your MVP spec'd and then go for this. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I've got to say. Hopefully, if I'll be around on the Discord, and I'll be posting sort of project updates as we go on from my team. So if you have any questions about how you want to set any of this up or how to use any of it, and give me a shout. I'm more than willing to help. So yeah, that was great. Catch you all in the Discord. Hopefully everybody's project's going okay. I think it's amazing what's happened in this. My first ever time doing anything like this, personally. Trying to explain anything like this, especially remotely, weirdly difficult. But yeah, that's great. Thanks a lot, everyone.